Hey people, this is Laughing Man, or in this case, Sick Man, and this is Sycomax. Yeah, lame jokes, we know, though we're sick as shit, so you're gonna have to rough it. If you guys want content, then you're gonna have to rough it. Well, it's been a while since we last talked, but some good news is that the next video podcast is actually nearing completion. Like, give us a couple more weeks and bam, you'll have it.
Like about 12 or 13.
Yeah, the next video podcast is going to be a good one. We've ordered a ton of extra art from Mel, and we got to thank our Patreon supporters for their help, because they've helped fund some of the artwork. And also, Mel, the FUBU, her tablet broke, which kind of put her at a bit of a standstill, though. But thanks to their help, she has a new tablet, and she's making art for us again, and for commissions, so awesome.
In other words, if you haven't gotten the hint yet.
I don't know, I think if we get any more Patreon stuff, I'm going to use it for fucking cough medicine. I feel like shit.
But to kind of get this conversation going, it has been a while since we released anything on YouTube, but that's not for the lack of trying, because December has actually been a busy month for us, because right at the end of November / early December, we recorded a new CCS video podcast roundtable discussion, and even though we normally say that about every single one of our episodes, but we do believe that this could be our greatest work yet. And the good thing about this discussion is that it was so good that, kind of like in the case of the MPA podcast, sometime after we release the condensed 15-minute video version, we are planning on releasing the full 40-something minute long audio version. So if you like the discussion and you want to hear some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, you'll get a chance to do just that. And as if that wasn't enough, after that, we're also planning on recording and releasing an after-hours discussion that's going to act as a sort of expansion / continuation of the subject matter of the video podcast episode. So basically, we kind of have a grand master plan going on here.
Yep.
Of course, the problem is that it takes time to execute all of this, so that's why you haven't been hearing much of us on the YouTube side of things. But of course, you might be asking, well, okay, the video podcast takes time to make, we understand that, but what about after hours? I mean, all it is just basically you two lazy asses sitting in front of a microphone and running your mouths for 50 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing is, even though After Hours does take considerably less effort to produce than the CCS video podcast, the problem is that it still takes time away from us working on the CCS video podcast.
Yeah, we'd either devote a couple days for an After Hours, or we devote that couple of days to the video podcast. So, and to be honest, there just hasn't been a ton worth talking about, because the last thing we want to do is we want to prattle on like we're doing right now about things that people just don't give a shit about.
All right, we have honestly tried to make After Hours a weekly feature, but sometimes there's just not enough news that we're...
The well runs dry.
Yeah, there's just not enough news that we really give a crap about, and we oftentimes strive to offer an alternative or a unique outlook on things, and there's not much you can say on something like the Sony hack that everyone else hasn't said. So
Yep.
But the reason why we decided to convene today is because there has been an interesting precedent that happened not too long ago. It was something that I myself didn't really care all that much about, but it was something that was brought up to our attention during our latest Patreon meet and greet live chat thingy, where one of our fans kind of asked us about our opinions on a game called Hatred. And in case you haven't heard about Hatred, we're gonna leave all the appropriate links in the description, but basically it's a game that's kind of trying to get the same type of notoriety and exposure as games like the first Postal game or Hotline Miami
or Night Trap back in 1995, before your time.
And the from what we've seen and from what we've read, the gist of the game is the fact that you're playing as a mentally unsound person who has had it with the world and decides to take out his frustration on innocent victims.
Yeah, total psychopath and misanthrope.
Yep, pretty much. And needless to say, you can kind of understand why that has garnered some controversy. The problem, of course, is that if I can understand why some people may not like the concept of the game, I can even understand why some people would be offended. But I do draw the line when people attempt to censor a work of art, because you could argue whether or not something like Hatred is fine art, but nevertheless, if we are to argue that video games are art, then in a certain sense, Hatred is also a work of art.
Right, because it's an expression.
Of course, there's been some, like I said, there's been some tumult surrounding this game, and people even tried to take it off the
Steam Green List, which as of December 29th, Steam restored Hatred back to the Greenlight, and then there's also a personal apology by Gabe Newell to the developers. Mm-hmm. Which is good, because if you look at it, it would have been really ironic to have Hatred pulled while Postal, the first and original one, which is almost identical to the new Hatred game, is still up on Steam.
Right. Let's go back to the Patreon meet and greet thing that was going on. At the time, I didn't really know much about the video game, so admittedly, my defense of it left much to be desired, because I kind of started babbling about, like, well, you know, if the freedom of speech and but the truth is I didn't really know much about it. But one thing I said is that it's kind of hard to defend something like Hatred, because in the case of other like violent video games like Grand Theft Auto or the two Manhunt games, or even like all those mainstream Call of Duty / Battlefield type of first-person shooters, there's usually some justification for the violence.
Right, there's usually some type of like moral slant to it, where, you know, you're saving so-and-so. I was watching the trailer for Hatred, and I noticed there's a lot of similarities to like the Punisher game for the PlayStation 2. Mm-hmm. And, Punisher, you go through and you throw bad guys in the wood chippers, and you throw them in fireplaces and dip their heads in, like, I guess, piranha tanks and all kinds of weird shit. And don't get me wrong, it's glorious, though, but when you start turning that onto civilians, then all of a sudden you start stepping back going, that's not exactly defendable, I guess.
Right. So, not content with my flimsy defense of that game, I started doing research on Hatred, and the thing that I don't understand is how can anyone condemn this game as almost like a training manual for would-be shooters, when even on their official website, Destructive Games, the developers of Hatred, as a PS of sorts after everything, they say that, and most importantly, don't forget, this is just a video game, don't take it seriously. And some people might take offense to that too, saying that, well, how can you create something so vile and morally reprehensible and then basically leave a smiley face saying, don't take this seriously.
Right, I've heard the exact same thing, or seen the exact same thing on a bunch of YouTube comments for these particular Hatred reaction videos, mm-hmm. where they used a lot of straw men, like, oh yeah, it's someone creates a rape fantasy game, and don't take it seriously, it's just a game. Or they're using a straw man, like, they create a game where you walk into a preschool and shoot all the kids, but don't take it seriously, it's just a game.
Right, but the thing about it, at least in the case of the Destructive Games, the developers of Hatred, they explicitly state on their website that this game is sort of a response, a radical response perhaps, but a response to all of this PC political correctness bullshit that's been going on, where games are kind of curb stomped and are forced to conform to a certain standard. Like, it's somehow like
there's a level of political correctness,
and also hypocrisy, because I'd say in about like 90% of video games, killing someone has become a sort of a default thing that you do.
Well, it's just become so everyday, it's become so mundane. You play Call of Duty and you kill hundreds of people within the span of the game. You go online, you kill hundreds more in multiplayer, and the violence isn't really communicated through games like that. Whereas here's a game where, from what I've seen, and I have not played the game because it's not out yet and all that kind of stuff, so full disclaimer, but here's a game that, in my opinion, is really curb stomping empathy back into games. I mean, this looks like a game that if I were to play it, I'd really wince at a lot of the things that you can do in the game, like, you grab a woman off the street, put a gun in her mouth, and blow the back of her brains out, and with no I guess moral justification if you want to use those terms.
Right, basically what it does, it takes all the graphic violence you'd see in other video games, like, again, the Punisher video game for the PlayStation 2.
Strips out the moral justification and presents it back to you on a little silver platter saying, no, seriously, this is what you're doing.
Yeah, it strips away all the glory and moral justification and shows you that, no, really, violence is ugly and unpleasant.
Yes.
And needless to say, because of that, because the game is basically like a massive gut punch that actually makes you sit back and ponder for a second, because it dared to take a step out of a lot of people's comfort zone.
Yes.
People have rallied and tried to get it censored and taken off of the Steam Greenlight service, which I honestly cannot get behind, because you know what, if you don't like this game, if you can't get behind the concept, and hey, listen, the main character of the game is essentially a cynic, a nihilist, a misanthrope, and hey, guess what? I'm all of those things, but I can't get behind this game. I have no desire to play that game just because I dislike 99.5% of humanity.
Right.
So you can't. So you know what? If you don't like this game, if you don't want to play it, there's a solution. Don't play it.
But that's the obvious solution, and obviously is don't play it. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think that it's my belief that to overcome something, you have to be confronted by it.
Right.
Let's say you're in the 1950s or 40s or whatever, and you hate communism. You hate it with a passion, you know. Well, to understand communism, you have to read the Communist Manifesto. You have to probably like get a bunch of research and be exposed to the communist ideas to know what the fuck you're hating. Mm-hmm. Whereas a video game, an ultra-violent video game, to understand that, you know, violence is not the glorified thing it's become, you have to have this, like you said, a gut punch. You need this gut punch game. Comes along, smacks you upside the head and says, no, seriously, I mean, if this isn't demons on Mars, this is fucking people in a mall.
Right. And again, you can only get exposed to that kind of violence if you choose to. If you go to Steam and you procure the game once it's out and you install it and you play it, only then you will get to experience hatred. Because it's let's face it, no one's like kidnapping kids like little Billy off the street and they place them in like a Clockwork Orange type of thing where they have their eyes open and it's like, look at this. No one is doing that. You'll only get exposed to the shocking violence in that game only if you choose to play it yourself. And if you have no desire to do it, once again, don't play it. But the problem is that we live in a trigger warning type of society, mm-hmm. where a group of self-appointed moral guardians are trying to tell other people what to think and what to buy based on their own twisted perception of things.
Or their total lack of perception in some cases.
Right, because, again, we haven't played the game, but neither have they.
Right.
They only saw the trailer. They didn't like what they saw, obviously. But instead of just saying, hey, you know what, it's not really for me, but if someone wants to expose themselves to this, sure, whatever, I don't care. Instead, they, as always, they get on their soapboxes and they start preaching to the masses about how this is morally reprehensible and how we must protect the innocent minds of that.
That too, but again, they never use facts to back up their claims. I mean, I think we quoted in our Yellow Gaming Journalism video that a recent study by Professor Chris Ferguson, published in January 2014 in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence, showed that there's no evidence for an increase of bullying or delinquent behavior among kids who play violent video games. There's an increase of aggression, according to some studies, just like the same way that, you know, people are more aggressive after playing sports or playing paintball or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But there's no concrete evidence for real-world violence when it comes to video games, movies, music, comic books themselves. And if there are, it's in such a fucking minority that, like, the person was either crazy to begin with, in the case of, like, the guy who shot Reagan after reading Catcher in the Rye, or Harrison Klebold from Columbine, who were mentally disturbed to begin with. And then they used some video games as like a temporary outlet, though, but
obviously it wasn't enough, but
yeah, obviously it wasn't enough, but that's like saying that to say that video games are the cause of real world violence, there would have to be like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands mm-hmm. of people going out and committing senseless violence because of video games, and there's not. It's such a minority that you can't even use it in statistics.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they don't operate with these facts and statistics because basically all of these statistics they disrupt and completely debunk their narrative. Because something you brought up in the Oculus Rift discussion you had with Ken a couple of months back is that a statistic that basically shows that ever since porn kind of sort of became more or less mainstream, the rape stats in the U.S. have, I wouldn't say they plummeted, but they
down 60%. I'd say that's a plummet.
Basically they plummeted. But of course, if you go with the narrative that porn is objectifying women and is sexist and whatnot, and statistics like that aren't really helping your case, it's easier just to close your eyes and stick fingers in your ears and pretend that statistic never exists, and instead go with the every fifth woman is going to get raped. Oh wait, that got debunked as well, so fuck you, haha.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing is that I gotta keep emphasizing this with everybody, including my own fucking family. Feelings are not facts. If there's data that says, okay, hatred came out, and all of a sudden there's been a huge influx of mass murders in malls or something like that, and an overwhelming number of them have played hatred, then yes, then you can point and say, okay, there might be there definitely is a correlation. There's a factual, statistical correlation, and then that would be the reason to get the game pulled. But to say, oh, I don't like this, that's fucking insane.
Of course,
because there's no evidence to back an opinion.
And hell, even if you don't like this, as we've said before, and it's your opinion, you have a right to it, but you know what, that does not give you the privilege or the power to dictate what other people should or shouldn't like. Because a quote that we've used in several of our videos is the quote from Stephen Fry, when he says that a lot of people are basically, shouting, I'm offended by this left and right these days. And here's the thing, so fucking what? And we've had some problems or incidents where people kind of ironically took offense to that, saying that, what do you mean, so what? I don't like it. It's like, look, if you don't like something, fair enough, I acknowledge your opinion, and you have all the right not to watch or listen to something that you personally don't like. But then to go and be, basically, to use kindergarten terms, a killjoy, a party pooper, and try to ruin everyone else's fun, that's sanctimonious is what it is.
Well, it's selfish is all it is. It's someone trying to, again, kind of like BMAS said in the previous video podcast, it's them putting themselves on a pedestal and saying, I'm a good person, look at me. I don't play hatred, look at me, I'm better than you are. And again, like Stephen Fry said in that quote that you just got done paraphrasing, massacring, he says it's little more than a whine. All it is saying, I don't like something. It's not really conveying an idea or a solution or anything else.
Well, that's what happens, is that these people, they get an outlet for their contempt or their distaste for the game, which is fine, it's their opinion, they have a right to express it. But the problem is that these the developers, publishers, whatever, they get so paranoid about any kind of negative publicity, even for a controversial game like Hatred that is trying to bank on said negative publicity, that they get gun shy or they jump the gun and they try to take it off, even though it's just a vocal minority saying that, hey, we don't like this. And
it's just like that petition that you posted on the video podcast about, out of the 2 million in sales that Assassin's Creed has on the average on each game, 2,000 people signed a boycott saying that, we're not going to play your game unless there's women in there. And that's like, what, a thousandth of the overall sales? I mean, that's not even a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm. But, and that's what it boils down to. I mean, what would happen if... Well, it's obviously going to happen. I mean, Valve, they've reinstated the game and it's going to be released. But, okay, here's the... let's try and think of a worst-case scenario here. Say Hatred gets released. Anyone who wants to play it, they procure it for their own money and they play it at their own leisure. Mm-hmm. And what's going to happen?
Well, either it sinks or swims depending on how many people want to play it. If people just generally kind of like shrug it off like the game Replay, that's pretty notorious, and it's never achieved critical success because a lot of people just don't want to play it.
Or critical or commercial success.
Exactly.
That's important too.
Yes.
And that's the thing, like, a lot of people keep bringing up, like, even I remember Extra Credits back in the day had an episode, I don't remember the name of the episode, but it had something to do with, like, insensitivity or hate speech and whatnot. whatnot. And as example of that in video games, they brought up all of these like obscure, not even indie games, but they were shit games with shit graphics and shit gameplay. Like there was this first-person shooter with graphics that looked like all those polygons you'd see in the Star Fox game for the SNES.
Game, yeah.
Yeah, where you basically play as a racist who goes out and shoots stick figures that are meant to be black people.
Jesus Christ.
And the way the guy Daniel Floyd talked about it was like it was almost the most reprehensible thing ever. But you look at it and it's pathetic. I'm sorry, is what it is. It's like when you look at the game, you instantly envision the kind of pathetic loser who made it, and who thinks that
it's either funny or it's
who thought that people would share his vision, if you will.
If anything, you look at something like that and you think, man, racists really are idiots.
Precisely. I mean, and I don't think there's any evidence that once that game was released, it led to more
racism went up.
Yeah, I mean, a funny statistic that I kind of showed, and I believe it was the Yellow Game Journalism video. I mean, we keep harkening back to the #Messiah trilogy we made, but that's kind of the reason why we made the trilogy, is so that we get everything off our chest when it comes to this topic. So the funny statistic I posted was in regards to Dragon's Crown. I don't think I need to explain how Dragon's Crown had garnered a lot of controversy over its depiction of one of the characters, the sorceress, and her rather voluptuous physique. And the thing is that that game was released, and there was actually an article with a title that says, Dragon's Crown has been finally released, and guess what? Nothing happened. And the thing is that I showed a screen cap from a video game. It's a website that has like all the sales for various video games, and according to, at least at the time, Dragon's Crown had sold about 200,000 copies, which is not that bad of an index for let's face it, a niche game like Dragon's Crown, an action adventure RPG beat 'em up
with exaggerated characters, both sexes.
Yeah, well, yes, that too, but that's not a bad number for a niche game. But here's the thing. Those were the stats for, I think Dragon's Crown had been released for about 9 months at that point. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, I then showed a screen cap for Mario Kart 8, which at the time had been released for just 2 months, and in that short time, that game sold basically about 2.2 million copies, and so then I left a comment basically saying that mathematically, 5 more times people have been exposed to go-karts than sexism.
Very true.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you can rave and complain about these games, but if they're not that popular, if they're not that mainstream, what kind of harm can they really cause?
Right.
I know that we live in a very outrage, or rather selective outrage-friendly society now, where
absolutely
everyone wants to get on their soapboxes and rally against this or that injustice or slight. But the problem is that in the case of hatred, I don't really see it having any kind of long-term effect on people.
Well, that's just it.
Like, can you really envision a normal person, a mentally sound person who has absolutely no dark thoughts, getting exposed to this case and turning into the next Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer?
Yeah, especially if in the game you can rape and eat your victims. Well, that's it. I see it only as like a novelty. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I mean, it does look and seemingly play a lot like the first Postal game, which I own. I bought it on Steam because it was like a nickel or something like that on one of the Steam sales. Mm-hmm. And you know, the game you start at your house and it says you gotta kill 15 people, and so you go out and you start shooting people. That's it. And I'm playing this. I'm like, there's nothing that gets me behind the character. There's nothing that it makes me involved in any way in what's going on. It's just, I guess, the novelty of, oh, you're crazy and you're killing people, and I guess you're the bad guy or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it just didn't click, so I never played it since. It's just not my thing. And personally, I found it a little bit distasteful versus like Postal 2, which is taking the shit out of not taking itself seriously. It's taking the piss out of itself by turning it into a big clusterfuck joke. But even then, it's just a novelty. I mean, the only thing it has going for it is oh wow, you can light a cop on fire and piss the fire out. Ah ha ha ha.
Oh no, that will surely lead to more people killing cops in real life.
And that's the exact knee-jerk reaction that I've gotten personally in my own family. My dad and my older cousin, he's probably about 40 right now, I can't remember how old he was when Postal 2 came out though, but they were talking about video games, right? And how video games are morally reprehensible, and they're terrible, and they're influencing kids, and they're going to turn kids into little school shooters just like Klebold and Harris. And
because the media told them.
Yeah, because the media told them. But all they did was they cited Postal 2. It's like my cousin was or still is a cop, and he was complaining about the fact that you could shoot a cop and pee in his mouth. And so my dad and him are like, yeah, video games need to be censored and all this kind of crap. I'm like, but that's such a fucking minority of video games. It's like saying, oh, somebody made Halloween in the 70s, so what we have to do is we have to make sure that no movies go above a G rating to protect people. Which is absolutely nuts. That's absolutely insane.
Of course.
That's like feelings reaction. Never mind the fact that there's no evidence that says Postal 2 ever made somebody kill somebody else. But it's just like, again, putting yourself on a pedestal and saying, I'm a nice guy because I don't like Postal 2, and thereby video games need to be censored.
Right. And that's the thing that really befuddles me, because video games, they are a relatively young new medium. They haven't been around for as long as music, novels, or movies.
Right.
And for some reason, because of this, and because of the immersion factor that video games have, the fact that it's an interactive medium, some people think that in some way it's any different from like movies and whatnot. Because there have been plenty of like shocking movies. I mean, hell, there's an entire genre called snuff films that often have a serial killer as a main protagonist, and you kind of see the events happening from his perspective.
Right.
And plenty of people will defend that, saying that, well, yes, you take offense to what he does, and it doesn't settle you, but that's sort of the point. That's sort of the artistic intention. It's like a massive gut punch. But when video games do that, like in the case of Hatred, all of a sudden, no, that's okay. I understand that argument, but think if there's just one person who misconstrues that message and views this video game as a training manual on how to kill people, oh, we can have that.
Well, it's the exact same argument that they used on Taxi Driver, one of my all-time favorite movies, where the guy tried to shoot Ronald Reagan after watching Taxi Driver because he was in love with Jodie Foster.
Right.
Which the guy was a mentally disturbed individual to begin with. He was already he fell in love with Jodie Foster on the screen and thought that if I go out and kill a president, then all of a sudden she'll love me. I mean, if that doesn't scream insanity, nothing else does. He's living in a total fantasy world. Now, the people who are mass murderers, like people who do like Sandy Hook and that kind of stuff, they are mentally disturbed people. They have long histories of mental health issues. And for people to shrug off and say, oh, it's because the guy played Halo, it's like, well, then how come millions of other people aren't committing mass murders after playing Halo? How come millions of people didn't try to shoot Ronald Reagan after watching Taxi Driver?
Of course.
And the interesting thing about Taxi Driver itself, though, is you have a character who, and this is just total moral ambiguity, all he wants to do is go out and kill people because he's so fed up with life, though. But if he would have succeeded in killing the guy who was running for president, he would be a villain, whereas he ended up killing a bunch of dirtbags to save Jodie Foster's character, that the people in the movie are like, oh, he's the greatest hero ever. And again, I think that this ties into Hatred,
right,
being so similar to The Punisher. The Punisher, you're killing criminals, you're running them through, wood chippers, just like in Fargo. You're sticking people's heads in fires with red hot pokers.
Yeah.
And whereas the only difference,
but of course, the justification is that you're a vigilante.
Exactly.
You're
You're an anti-hero. You're the good guy. That's the big difference. Whereas Hatred, the only difference between that level of violence and Hatred's violence is that you're just killing people willy-nilly, which raises a lot of interesting moral and philosophical questions, which I think is important, and why I think this game deserves to exist. Because, again, to overcome something, to fix a problem, you have to be confronted with a problem. It's like, I can't remember the name of the movie, though, but there's a movie with a really long, drawn-out, 15-minute long rape scene in it. It must have been a French film from a decade ago or something like that. I can't remember what it was though. But there's this long, drawn-out rape scene, and it's just so fucking uncomfortable, and it's vile, and it gives you, makes you nauseous watching it, and you look at it and it's like, Jesus Christ, rape is terrible, which it is. Mm-hmm. That's the fucking point. Yes. It's supposed to convey the point that rape is not cool. Here, the hatred game is making a point that murder and these killing rampages are not cool. Just look at the backlash it's gotten. People are condemning it without even playing it because it's so reprehensible.
And you could say that in that respect, the game is successful because it is accomplishing what it set out to do, or at least what I think the developer set out to do, because it does seem like the game is kind of sort of a meta commentary on
possibly yes,
violence in video games and how we've become desensitized.
Yes, they're curb stomping some empathy back into the players.
And if that's the case, and if there are people who want to get exposed to that and experience the game for themselves, again, it's their decision. No one is forcing them to play it. So just because you take offense with it, okay, fair enough, that's your right. But if you think that gives you some kind of power to dictate if anyone else can expose themselves to it, then I'm sorry, but you're just a delusional, self-righteous twat.
Yeah, and even if it's not a game you really want to play, I think that the fact that it exists for people to experience if they so choose is a good thing, because again, you have to confront these evils. You have to see what evil really is. It's how, if we all lived in this big hug box, which I'm from what I read, the developers are kind of lampooning the fact that we all live in this big PC world, big hug box where everything's, people are oversensitive and people are protected from all the evils of the world. Well, how do you know what evil is if you can't ever see it? I mean, that's kind of the whole entire, going back to the Chris Rock thing,
yes,
where he was on campus and saying, it's not fun to do college campus comedy anymore because they are so overly sensitive about hearing things that challenge their perception. To play a video game where you're killing civilians like that, it gives you an impression of what true violence could be. I mean, you imagine someone shooting up a mall in real life, and now they make a video game where you can shoot up a mall. That should spark something in your head that says this is morally detestable, and this is something that to be detested. It's over the top, it's exaggerated, obviously though, but it's still something that needs to be presented so people realize that this kind of shit exists.
Yes.
Real murder rampages exist. Sandy Hook, mall shootings, even war in general.
Of course.
This type of violence exists. How do you know what violence is unless you've never been exposed to it? It's like a fish can't tell you what water is unless it's been outside of water.
Yeah, and one thing I just remembered that also garnered the same kind of controversy was, remember the opening mission in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2?
Is that the one where you shoot up a mall or you go on a rampage?
Yeah, an airport.
Yeah,
an airport, yeah. And I have just realized that I ought to commend the developers for even including that in the game, because here you have Call of Duty, potentially one of the most popular video game franchises in history.
One of the most violent too.
One of the most violent too, because it's become successful because every single game you are killing legions of people. Of course, there's sometimes justification that, hey, it's World War II and
they're the bad guys. They're wearing different color shirts than you are. You get to kill them.
Yeah, precisely. And here in the second game, they basically kind of again do this kind of gut punch thing where they show you that, hey, guess what? Violence and murder, it's reprehensible. It's not glorious. It's not this kind of thing where you're the real American hero and you're just killing the terrorists and spreading democracy.
You're killing those Vietnamese or Russians or whoever the hell we want to be mad at.
But of course, people didn't, and this is what it's what you talked about, how people don't want to confront reality because people didn't want to basically triumphant hero fantasy where they're true American hero that fight off against the Russians, because they didn't want to have that experience spoiled with a little dose of reality. They tried to get that opening mission excised from the game because it's like, hey, I didn't sign up for this. I wanna kill those damn Ruskies and be the true American hero. That's what it is, though.
Right. Like, I guarantee you that there'll probably never be a World War II game where you play as Nazis shooting people from the Allies.
Of course not. And meanwhile, as far as movies go, we've had numerous movies that took I don't want to say they kind of glorified the Nazis, but were kind of from the perception of the Nazis. I mean, of course, there's a downfall, and there was also that Tom Cruise movie where he played
Valkyrie.
Yeah, Operation Valkyrie. And again, someone could say, you could make an argument that, well, by showing the history from the perception of the Nazis, you can kind of create more Nazi sympathizers. True, perhaps, but I'd argue that more people would, after watching something like Schindler's List, they'd see the horrors of Holocaust and would denounce fascism,
right,
versus aligning themselves with it. I don't know. It's the thing about it is that it's kind of like pieces of a larger puzzle, because on the video game side of things you have hatred, on the movie side of things you have something like The Interview that's been threatened and whatnot. On the comedy side you have these oversensitive college kids trying to basically steal a comedian's level, their profession, by telling them that, hey, you can joke about this, you can joke about that, and it's like, since when are you an expert on what's funny?
That's the point of comedy too, is comedy, like George Carlin and Chris Rock, it's always been in your face. They bring up these complex and often sometimes tough subjects to get you to think. Mm-hmm. That's the fucking point. I mean, George Carlin's probably done more to change my perception of my world around me than probably anyone else. No politician, no parents, no nothing else. Mm-hmm. George Carlin asks tough questions. He puts things out in front of you that says, hey, here's a different way of looking at things. It's going to challenge your perception, and from there you can draw your own conclusions. Mm-hmm. To have that kind of thing taken out of our hypersensitive hug box environment is dangerous. I mean, granted, you could make the straw man comparison. Oh, well, you want to invite KKK people and Nazis to speak at college campuses? Well, it's freedom of speech, and the campuses get to determine who gets to go and speak. But if you can hear, again, like this video game that you're talking about where you shoot black people because some racist made it, if you can hear some of the rhetoric that they are proposing, more likely than not, you're going to side against them.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's a free market thing, but that's the thing. If you give these people a forum,
if you give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves.
Yeah, that's what it is, because people will draw their own conclusions. It's just because someone, like I said, a normal person is going to get exposed to hatred, or a movie like Maniac, that's the one with what's his face, Elijah Wood, where it's from the point of view of the killer.
Right, the remake.
Yeah, the remake, or Penn Jillette's upcoming director's cut film.
Right.
I don't really see a normal, mentally sound person with strong moral convictions getting corrupted, as they often throw around that word, corrupted by this movie, and then turning into the next fucking Unabomber.
Right. And that's just it too. Like, you watch something like Taxi Driver, one of my favorite movies, and I don't have this, psychopath death wish fantasy, so I must not be affected by it. Woohoo! Mm-hmm. I think it's a great movie because it really gets into the mind of the character, though. But it's not something that makes me want to go out and kill people or pimps or politicians, or well, pimps and politicians are the same thing. But I think that these things have a right to exist. To have a movie that portrays a 15-minute long rape scene that's extremely graphic, woman screaming, the guy is having his fun, it's terrifying. I mean, it is. You sit there, you're uncomfortable, and unless you already have a rapist mentality, more likely than not, it's gonna kind of reinforce the fact that you don't want to rape anybody ever.
Right.
But that's why these things need to exist, is because they need to challenge your perceptions. They need to be out there so you can, if you choose so, you can watch them and say, wow, this really is tough to process.
Right, because otherwise, how do you know what true evil is if you've never been exposed to it? And this could be a bit of a false dichotomy, but what would you rather have, like, when it comes to being exposed to violence? Would you rather a person, say, be raped for real, or get exposed to a work of art that addresses a rape incident or whatever, like say The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
Yeah.
You don't have to go through that experience because you see it and it's morally reprehensible, it's vile, and unless you're a mentally unsound person, there's no way you can identify with the rapist in this situation. I don't know, I think people just need to grow a thicker skin, and again, no one is forcing you to expose yourself to either hatred or director's cut or whatever. If you want to watch it or play it, you can do it. and chances are you'll draw your own conclusions from it.
And possibly even a stronger conclusion.
Yeah, a stronger conclusion, because otherwise, if you really try to censor all of these works of art because they offend you and whatnot, what are we going to be left with? All games are just going to be more of, whimsical, bright Mario platformers from now on.
Have you ever read Brave New World?
Unfortunately, no, but do tell.
When you can get a chance, because it's basically a utopia turned into a dystopia where people are basically given everything that they'd ever possibly want. At least the alphas are, the people who are genetically modified to be the best and brightest, and some people are like nerfed right from the growing chambers to be subservient classes, dimwits who are almost everybody's drug addicted, because why be depressed when you can take this drug? Be happy all the time, go have sex with whoever you want all the time, and everybody's living in bliss though. But it's just such a shallow experience that one of the characters, who's an outsider, eventually goes crazy from the being exposed to this artificial hug box. But I don't know, I'm kind of overgeneralizing a lot of the themes in Brave New World though. But it's a good book about how having something be too pleasant can be more dangerous than good, I guess. That's kind of what I took away from it.
It's a disadvantage, and plus, at the end of the day, this is a point I kind of made in the Yo Game Journalism video, is it's really hypocritical that we have, not to pin the blame on all of these journalists, but they do deserve their share of criticism, because they were kind of the ones who rallied against hatred. But so you have all of these articles commending video games for being one of the most compelling art forms, and
interactive art, you can really identify with the characters and all that kind of stuff, and
and how they're constantly urging video games to go into bold new directions and explore a plethora of thought-provoking and compelling ideas. But the moment a game takes a risk and steps outside that SGW-friendly comfort zone, it immediately has to be censored, because that's not part of the narrative.
Yeah, whereas it could be the whole entire narrative, like in Hatred. I mean, the point is you kill people. You're just a psychopath, murderer. You go out, you shoot anybody who comes across to you, if it's anything like Postal, that is. And I mean, to get up in arms about a game that's, number one, not even released yet, number two, one that's kind of going in this bold new direction, so like we keep on saying, curb stomp some sympathy into characters or into gamers again,
right?
To lampoon that and to say it has to be taken off shelves, that's insane. Oh, this is going to end on a downer, isn't it?
Well, that's basically the only thing we can say, is that we do believe that this game has a right to exist, and
that's obvious.
You know what? I could be going on a limb here, but I'm foretelling that once the game is released, there's not going to be this massive increase in mass shootings, because we've had all of these controversial works of art before, even in the case of video games like Postal or the Punisher game or whatever. And so far, there's no scientific evidence that there is a long-term effect where, because you read some of the arguments that these people post about how these video games are going to corrupt the children or the innocent people out there and whatnot, and you would almost think like we live in the world of the movie They Live, and how all of these video games have these hidden messages that if you play Grand Theft Auto, it basically says kill all women or disrespect authority, etc. And it's like it's not. It's just a video game is what it is at the end of the day.
Bullshit. If anything you buy has hidden messages in it, it would be saying buy more. That's what one of the guys from, I think it was Judas Priest, said after they got charged with having hidden lyrics saying to commit murder and suicide on their records because of something that happened in the 80s. The guy went on record saying, if we were going to put anything on our records, it'd be buy more of our records.
Of course, because at the end of the day, it's about the mighty dollar versus corrupting the youth and sending them out to kill people or disrespect women and whatnot.
Yeah. I believe that there might be some need for censorship when a game can have direct real-world consequences or whatnot. One example is when Valve pulled the Paranautical Activity game after the developer threatened to kill Gabe Newell. I believe is totally justified, because to make such a real world threat is not cool.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of when people say that, you know what, free speech is great and all, but it has consequences. Because oftentimes people throw that around when someone is fired for something they said, like from a position of power and whatnot. So it's almost like said in Schadenfreude, like, yeah, that shows you.
Right.
But in this case, it's not a case. It's not that the game itself was censored for its contents. It's more the developer of the. I've read the story. You've given me the link, and from what I've read, the guy, the developer of that game, he's basically just a massive crybaby. Is who he is.
Yeah, he vented too much, and some of those vents included, "Gabe Newell should die. I'm gonna kill Gabe Newell."
And I mean, I'm not an independent game developer. I've never gone through the process of getting my game out there, but I think that in this day and age, if you are an indie game developer, you should be on your fucking knees praising Gabe Newell for giving you a platform to get your game released, because I don't think that any other company is offering you the same kind of meritocratic platform where people can vote and your game can get released. Because you know what, if you don't like Steam, good fucking luck going to EA or Activision or
Squaresoft. They need some fresh ideas.
Yeah, there needs some. Good luck going to any of those big wigs and trying to get your game published. And hey, from what I've read, I can understand there was some kind of miscommunication going on between Steam and their game and whatnot. Guess what? All it would have taken is one email to Steam support saying, hey, there's been a discrepancy, that's not really how I want to publish my game, that's not the title card I want to use, and it would have been fixed. Instead, this jerk-off, he basically goes on Twitter and starts ranting and raving and about, Steam is so fucking bullshit, what the fuck, my game was meant to be released. It's like, what did you expect was going to happen? It's like, you know what, imagine if like the opening scene of The Godfather, when the family wedding is taking place, and one of the lieutenants storms into Don Corleone's office and goes, what the fuck, I had to wait for 2 hours to kiss your fucking... He would have been shot there on the spot.
Well, just in the real world, let's say you work at McDonald's. Let's just, you use kind of an entry level job. Nothing wrong with working at McDonald's. I believe that work is work, and that's awesome if you do anything. But let's say you're at like an entry level job at McDonald's, and the second day you start going off on a huge rant about your boss. Why the fuck should I clean up the grease trap? I can't believe that asshole, blah blah blah. And your boss hears you, he's gonna fire your ass. That's real world consequences.
It's common fucking sense that if you go and you badmouth your employers, and mind you, it's not that Valve are this guy's employers, but they are offering him a service, a platform for his game, and if he goes and badmouths their service, well, guess what? They are basically gonna fucking bust your ass because you kind of disrespected the Godfather here.
Yeah, it's like disrespecting your boss. I mean, the boss is willing to hire you and pay you for your work, your time. And if you don't like it, you can obviously go somewhere else. There's nothing saying that you have to work at one place or another. But Gabe Newell and Steam, Valve, created the Greenlight community. And if you don't want to respect that, then, tough luck. Whereas, again, like I said, Gabe Newell sent a personal apology to the developers of Hatred, saying, okay, we were wrong for pulling this because... we thought it basically they got a lot of flack from the PC crowd.
Of course.
Saying, you got to take us down because this is evil and blah, 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 and my opinion's this. And again, the similarity here between that and the guy who shot his mouth off with death threats towards Gabe Newell is that Twitter is the easiest fucking way to put someone's foot in their mouth.
Of course.
It's like people, their thoughts bypass the common sense filter and go straight to their fingertips. And it's like Craig Ferguson said, with Twitter, you can just type whatever you want, tick, boom, bam, it's out there for millions of people to see. Whereas, previously to all this instant technology, if you wanted to communicate something like, oh my God, I can't believe that, the king did this, I gotta vent my frustrations, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna, write this letter, and I'm gonna have to go out and get some ink, and I'll have to find something to get the ink and crush the berries to make the ink, and I'm gonna have to go get a quill, I'm gonna have to pluck a feather off the chicken, and I'm gonna have to go out and weave the parchment and weave the parchment and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, I got to make the capital F with, all the little squirrely bobs and all the classical medieval, deer and backgrounds and all shit. And then, I'm just going to let it go. one big capital F, and then the rest is just uck it.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? The common man is given too much power. I mean, it's great that everyone has a platform to share.
Well, no, I don't think the common man getting too much power is a bad thing. I just think that people are too used to advertising their thoughts, which...
Well, I mean, the bad thing about it is that usually in the case of like hatred and whatnot, to bring the discussion full circle, is that it's usually just a vocal minority, but because their tweets and whatnot get out there, and they start a hashtag that's like hashtag cancel hatred or whatever, and Valve might listen to that. And it's like, well, there's a lot of people expressing their discontentment with this game. I better pull the plug on it. That's where all this comes from. It's just a bunch of people who it's a knee-jerk reaction more often than not.
Yes, perfect way of summing it up. Knee-jerk reaction.
Because here's the thing: a lot of people who may protested hatred, it could have just been, like I said, a knee-jerk reaction. They just watched the trailer, went on Twitter, and said like, "Oh, this is the most vile game I've ever seen." But if you were to find that somehow miraculously find and track that person, like even a week after that, and you were to have a reasonable debate with him about this game and artistic merit and whatnot, maybe that person would change their opinion, maybe on their own after doing some research about that game. Mm-hmm. But because it happens there and then, and that tweet remains in history, that's where all of these publishers and whatnot get their warped perception of what the public's opinion is.
Right.
Even though you and I are part of the public, you're more of a gamer than me, but still, when it comes to issues of creative freedom and whatnot, I'm right there with you that this game should be released. But they don't listen to us, they just listen to a vocal minority, and it's like, oh, we better pull the plug on this game. And I think it is somewhat of a victory, the fact that this game got reinstated,
right,
and there was a public apology from Gabe Newell. I mean, I don't usually believe in apologies.
Personal, not public.
Well, a personal apology. Was it really personal, or was it a case of Gabe's assistant writing it up and him just putting his signature where the X is?
Well, the fact that they got an apology from Valve, and it was, I guess, signed by Gabe Newell, it means that Valve realized that they screwed the pooch, mm-hmm, and they did something to correct the issue.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm usually not a huge fan of apologies because more often than not, they're not sincere, and it's just a case of companies caving into peer pressure. But mm-hmm, it does seem like the tables have finally turned, and now it's the other way around. Because it wasn't the SGWs who got an apology this time; it was the creators of the game. It's like, you know what, we got a warped perception of what the people wanted. Turns out it was just a vocal minority. So sorry, guys. So
yep,
I guess it is some sort of victory for us.
Yep, which is freaking awesome. I mean, not that I want people to be suppressed in favor of companies, but when you have like a very, very small minority of people raising hell, and then of course the media, game outlets, catch on to it, and they start writing articles about this group of people who are pissed off for whatever reason, it starts turning a spark into a forest fire.
Yeah, so it's not even a fucking issue. It turns a non-issue into something scandalous and whatnot. And
yeah,
you know what? Even though we've been on a little SGW rant here again,
yep.
What I'm gonna say at the end is that I'm not gonna top it off by saying that, oh, you should go and support hatred just to prove all of those hashtag progressives wrong. No, you know what? If you want to play that game, if you want to get exposed to the contents of that game, by all means, it's your right. Google it, you'll find it. If not, again, that's totally your right. We don't care.
Yep, it's there. You can play it or you don't have to, and we'll see what happens, I guess. But again, the only way that I'd officially condemn a game is if there is evidence that can prove that a game has caused real-world problems, or a movie has caused real-world problems. Overwhelmingly, I'm not talking about like one instance of Taxi Driver here. I'm talking about like if hundreds of people were trying to assassinate politicians after a movie came out, that would be huge.
Mm-hmm.
So. But we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully people remember that feelings are not facts, something I like to stress. And I am going to go drink more NyQuil.
And with that said, I think we're going to wrap up this discussion before we start babbling even more about this subject matter. So thank you all for listening to us, and see you in about 2 months.
Nah, not 2 months. It'll be a couple weeks.
Oh, okay, there goes the joke, so...
Well, people might take it seriously. People take everything else seriously, so I don't want there to be any confusion. I want people to either get the joke or explain to the people who can't understand jokes that we're joking.
All right, in case you were offended by that little quip I made. All right, I think that's enough. I got a laugh from you, and that's usually a good way to end an after hours with you laughing hysterically.
Yes.